Hey, coming up, we've got Mr. Brad Klontz, Dr. Brad Klontz.
Easy cowboy.
I know, right? Is joining us. Brad is also a guy with tons of followers on TikTok. I think over 1 million people now follow Dr. Brad Klontz, which allows us to have this amazing TikTok segment that he dives in and hopefully changes the tide so people get some good advice on TikTok. He's in Emily and my new book, Stacked. We talk about his approach to behavior and how, as you know, OG, behavior is everything when it comes to your investments. When I was a financial planner a long time ago, it was all about sales strategies. And as you know, OG, it's much more about psychology now. And CFP recently just added a whole piece on psychology to their criteria for being a certified financial planner. And because of that, Dr. Klontz has written a new book specifically for financial planners. So we're going to talk financial planners. We're going to talk psychology. Even more than that, we're going to talk about staying in the game and doing the right thing with your money. I'm super happy to finally welcome this gentleman to Mom's Basement. You know what's funny? He's in our book Stacked, and he hasn't yet been on the show. I have no idea why we've had that oversight. Dr. Brad Klontz is here. How are you, man?
Doing great. It was great to see you last week. Happy to meet with you here.
I know. I felt like, though, like with everybody at FinCon, I know you probably feel this way too. It was like, hi, good seeing you, bye.
Yep, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, not enough time. Hey, I'm always curious how people get into their chosen field and how they get excited about what they do. And you and I feel, I think, really, at least I do, really blessed by the fact that I get to hang out with people that seem very passionate about what they do. What was kind of your homecoming into this idea of behavior and finance and the intersection of those two?
Well, I grew up broke in a family system that didn't have a lot of money. And I became very interested in money very early on in my life when I realized that there were things I couldn't do because we didn't have money. And I was really struck with this curiosity around why have some branches of my family been in the United States for hundreds of years, and we don't have a building with our name on it. We don't have any assets. We don't own any land. I come from very hardworking, good, conscientious people. And so I was really struck by that. And so as a kid, I started to research. I remember sitting down in middle school over at dinner at one of my friends' house, and they lived in what I thought was a mansion. It was a middle-class house. And I couldn't believe the stuff they had. They had this yard. And I remember interviewing my friend's dad. Like, oh, what do you do for a living? And then how do I get that job? So I think as a kid, I was already starting to do some of that research because I saw a direct link between having money and having access to resources and experiences.
Oh, that's interesting. But that's the beginning. How did you then finally, did you just then fall into, okay, it's going to be behavior, or did you have crappy jobs like I did along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Crappy jobs were essential in keeping me in school. And I realized very early on, and I did all sorts of things. I worked in a graveyard. I worked in a road commission. Really? Yeah, laying asphalt.
In a graveyard? I
did, yes. I buried people. And I shoveled tons of asphalt every day. And for me, going to college was the best thing ever. I got to sleep in, there was air conditioning. And I quickly realized that the longer I stayed in school, the more money I would get paid for working less. And so I arrived at that, or at least not sweating and breaking down my body. So when I got into college, I decided I wanted to pursue a career in psychology to try to figure out my own highly dysfunctional family and not wanting to recreate it. And I went to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, and I'm like, okay, so if I want to be a therapist, what career do I need to take to make the most money? I'm going to be doing the same job. What degree do I need to get to make the most money? And so I really did look at it like a business decision. And then flash forward, I had to borrow $100,000 in student loans to get through school. I was raised in a lower income family, but very frugal, like debt is bad, that kind of thing. And so I was really stressed by all that debt. And I saw a friend of mine make $100,000, Joe, trading stocks in 1 year. He made $100,000 day trading on margin. It was the most incredible thing. I was finally being exposed to investing and how rich people do it. And so I sold everything I owned of value. I bought a $500 car I was driving around. I put all my money in the stock market and I started to day trade, Joe, and it was incredible. I started to make a lot of money, and then the tech bubble burst 4 months later, and I watched all my money melt away. And here I am, a clinical psychologist, and I ask myself this question: why would a reasonably intelligent person do something so stupid with his money? And that's what I've been trying to figure out for the last 20 years.
Still trying to figure out why I became a day trader.
Exactly.
Back in what? In 1999 then? You were in 1999.
That's when it was, about 3 months before the crash.
I got fired in 1999 by a client who, and we'll talk about this because it always drives me crazy when people see their financial advisor as somebody that competes against the market. But I got fired because our portfolio for this couple only did 45%. And their buddies, as you know, in 1999 were doing 85, 90, 200%, because they were all loaded up in tech stocks.
Exactly.
Crazy time. Hey, I want to take off the how did we begin hat to now Dr. Klontz is a professional. You sit at a place that's at the intersection of behavior and CFPs, especially here with your new book. In the professional financial planning, me being a guy from the early 90s financial planning, I was taught sales training, right? I worked for one of the few big firms that were actually charging a fee for a financial plan. There were certainly smaller firms doing it, but our big firm was starting to do it that I worked for. But most of my training was around selling products. I didn't get any behavior training. Today, as you note at the front of your book in the introduction, there's quite a bit of training on psychology now to become a certified financial planner. But where do you think the CFP can make this better, Brad?
Yeah, so I think that any person who's been doing financial planning for any period of time realizes that human beings are wired to just not do the right things around money, like quite often. And, back to my example, I had FOMO. I saw people making a lot of money. You feel a sense of panic inside. This is that prehistoric, tribal cave person brain we all have. And so we're really inclined to do the wrong thing constantly when it comes to money. And it plays out in every area of our life. And I think that's where financial planners who work so intimately with clients and money innervates every aspect of our lives in terms of what matters most. And so we're most vulnerable, for example, in worrying about our kids and how can we, financially support them and without spoiling them. I mean, there's all these things that come into play. And I think the financial planning field, as primarily working with individuals on an ongoing basis, realize it's really important to understand their client psychology to serve them best.
Yeah. But are they where they should be? I mean, is this a continuum? Should we be even further along the path of psychology and less on sales than we are today?
Oh, well, Joe, obviously I'm going to say yes, because this has been my entire career. But we're just sort of limping into it as a field. So the CFP board, it was less than a year ago, came out and said, hey, we're going to make 7% of the exam psychology of financial planning, which was great because part of their learning objectives, they go grassroots, which is a really cool thing. So they actually survey financial planners and they're like, how much, what are you dealing with every day in your office? And so this actually emerged as an area of interest and need before curriculums were even developed. So that's what I've been scrambling around doing for the last year.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see this develop into something real because, I don't know, I felt like I only became successful as a financial planner when I started learning about psychology. And really, it had to be self-taught. But back to what you said earlier, which is, and you said this at the beginning of your book, I'm going to quote you. The truth is, our primal brains are not wired to make smart money decisions. You talked about that earlier. I mean, this goes way, way, way back. You talk about how in the early days, I mean, we were kind of pack hunters. Let's talk for a second about our primal brain that you reference in your last book.
Yeah, so I think that every sort of financial mistake we make or inclination to do the wrong thing makes absolute perfect sense when you understand how we have spent the bulk of our time on this earth in terms of trying to survive and thrive. And, 99.9% of our time on this planet has been in this group of about 100 to 150 closely affiliated people. And this really matters in terms of what we're inclined to do, with a focus on present day survival. So even the concept of saving goes against our natural programming. You couldn't save things to begin with. So for example, food, you couldn't really save it. So we're wired to consume as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And I know your listeners are understanding what I'm talking about, especially the fatty, sugary stuff. So we're going against our own biological programming by trying to tone that down. Same thing happens with money. We're also programmed to share. Like if you're in a tribe of 100 people and all of a sudden you're the hoarder of all the money, people aren't going to like you very much. And it's expected that you share with other people. And so just the concept of saving for our own individual selves, our own individual families, goes against our wiring. And I'll give you one other example. We mentioned the tech bubble. That's the herd mentality. So we are wired, if our entire tribe is running in one direction, if we stay still, we die. And so all of your ancestors who had the tendency to want to stay still and be reasonable while the entire tribe is running away from something, they all got picked off. They did not pass on their genes. And so we are all very much vulnerable to things like FOMO.
It's funny when we talk about sharing, about how we think of sharing is so noble. And you talk about in your book how that goes way back. I mean, it was not only expected that you share so that everybody stays alive and your herd or your group stays alive, but because of that, it seems like the most noble thing we could do is for me to give you something.
Well, that's right. And, that tribal sense is all about survival in an area of limited resources. And so this is one of the reasons why people who are climbing the socioeconomic ladder right now, so if you grew up in a lower income environment, there can be a lot of social pressure for you to share what you have, because that's how you survive when there's a lack of resources. And so that's a challenge, as I know, Joe, when people are trying to climb the ladder, they have to balance this. Why is it okay for me to save and invest if people around me don't have enough money? And the hack really is to try to find a way to do both and build that into the plan.
It's funny. The lead singer of U2, Bono, I heard him giving a interview once, and he was talking about the difference in the United States, the culture in the United States versus Ireland, where he grew up. But I think this is also prevalent in the United States, Brad, and in your book, you talk a little bit about this. But Bono said in the United States, you see the person up on the hill and you go, someday I'm going to be that person living in a huge house, right? You go over to your neighbor's house, you think it's a mansion. You're like, oh, that's amazing, middle-class house. But he said in Ireland, what's hardwired into his life was always, instead of see that person on the hill, someday I'm going to be that person with that house. In Ireland, it was see that person on the hill, someday I'm going to get that fucker. There's this big, but I feel like the U.S. is kind of there too now, right? We like to see people kind of dragged down a little bit because they're wealthy.
Right. Well, rich is a word that we like to ascribe to people who have more than we do. And it always has a little stank on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And what I think it's a bit ironic too is that it's a very relative term. It's a very relative term. And so compared to the rest of the world, the average American is filthy, dirty, disgustingly rich. And so I always find it fascinating when we project a bunch of stuff on people we don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the second I think anything about somebody else, you see people, we see this in online forums all the time, right? You see them go, oh, why are they buying the brand new car? Well, maybe they make $1 bajillion a year and a car is exactly what they want out of life. And we, if it doesn't align specifically with what we do, right, we poo-poo it.
And social media too, back to that sort of tribal sense, that the feeling that we're being left behind, that we're being left out, really does inspire us to take action. And so one of my one of the reasons I'm on social media and I make the content I do is because many young people are being exposed to what comes down to actually misinformation about how people become wealthy and the psychology of people who become wealthy. because we're seeing people leaning against Lamborghinis. Hey, no offense if you have a Lamborghini, Joe, but standing in front of mansions, wearing designer clothes, all of this stuff. And if you look behind it, it's sales driven. It's a sales approach. You're trying to get people to buy your course or whatever it is. And it also goes against what we know based on the research on how self-made millionaires, for example, become self-made millionaires. And they actually don't spend like that, is what all the studies show.
Well, and that I guess is my next question. So armed with the fact that we are these imperfect beasts when it comes to achieving this objective of financial independence and financial security, what's our first steps then, Brad, to kind of fight against that?
Yeah, I think the most important part, I think, is because so many of us feel so ashamed about it. We have a lot of shame around money. I mean, there's shame you have too much, shame you have too little, shame for all the mistakes you make, which is why I love to talk about all my mistakes. We're all in the same club here. We're wired to do this wrong. So I think de-shaming is really important because that'll keep a lot of us stuck. And also understanding that we're just wired to do it all wrong. And so we have to overcome our impulses. So for example, in the stock market, I mean, the impulse when the market's going down, and you're going to feel this on a visceral level, is I got to sell. Everyone's selling. It's the wrong thing to do. When markets are down and stocks have taken a hit, it's the worst time to sell. And conversely, when things are screaming up, like in the tech bubble, I even knew that there was something wrong with this when I'm sitting next to my friend and he's buying, all these shares of a company. And I literally say, well, what company is that? And he's like, I don't know. Click. And he buys more. I had a sense there's something wrong with this. However, he's making money. I don't want to feel like I'm being left. I don't want to feel left out. So I think understanding that really, really does help because we have to override those impulses.
So, and there's a lot of things that you point out in your book, and I want to start off with one, environment. Tell me about the environmental things around you that we got to be wary about.
Yeah, so the environment, it has a profound impact on the beliefs that we adopt related to money and then our financial behaviors and outcomes. And we're seeing this generationally too. I just saw a very disturbing study that millennials are trading at a rate that Gen X and previous generations never did. And there's this incredible confidence. Yeah, there's this incredible confidence. I'm going to beat the market. And if you think about it environmentally, they were raised, many of them, in a context in which it was the biggest bull market in history. So quite literally, you could buy anything and it would be going up. And we then have this problem where we then attribute this success to our brilliance in trading. And actually, one of the best things that happened to me is I didn't have 5 years of great day trading before I lost all my money. Because at that point, the stakes would have been way higher. So the best thing that happened to me was 3 months into it, I got destroyed. And so that's one of the unfortunate consequences of an environment in a bull market. And certainly other examples like the Great Depression led to an entire generation of hoarders who are very anxious about money and afraid that they don't have enough. And so the environment, the culture has a profound impact on our experiences.
But so you're saying the first thing I'm hearing then is just this shock absorber, like the shock absorber between what I feel and what I do.
That's right. And the environment is something we're all swimming around in, and we're not even conscious that other people are having different experiences than we are. I always find it fascinating when I see on social media people complaining about how bad things are. And it's like, be a student of history and you're going to realize that, yes, the stock market has taken a hit. It's done this and that and the other. But have you ever heard of the Great Depression? Because things were a lot worse then, and when you look at the last 100 years, the stock market has returned average of over 10% a year for the last 100 years. But we become really myopically focused on this very short time frame. And I think it really does help to broaden out that perspective.
Well, we talked a little bit about social media. You have a very robust TikTok presence. And I'm wondering just this idea of sharing, there have been studies. There was a study I read a few weeks ago that showed that people that are Gen X, less likely to share. Boomers, even less likely to share anything financially. Gen Z, very, very open to sharing. What do you think about this idea of sharing back and forth? Does it depend on the message or is sharing a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, what's interesting is that we're all wired to share, right? So we all have that sort of instinct. The question is how much and how do we do it so that we're actually not like hurting somebody else? Like there's actually situations in which you giving money to other people actually hurts them. So just being aware of that, people who are involved in some sort of addiction or overspending, sort of chronic cycle. So being conscious of that. But I think some of it comes from the environment in which we've experienced, money. And so, for example, with the Great Depression, so many people were traumatized because literally they're going to bed hungry. And so we have a tendency to hold on to our money so that we can protect ourselves and our family. If you grow up in a time of plenty, it's so interesting too when you look at savings rates, for example. The savings rates right at the beginning of COVID were some of the highest in history. And what's so fascinating is that was a pretty rough time, right? And when you look at times when money's flush and everybody's, enthusiastic and optimistic, people save almost nothing. And so the irony there is when times get worse and money gets tighter, people end up having more money that they save. And when they feel great about the future, people just spend in ways that are, quite irresponsible, actually.
It's so wild how that's just flipped.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating because it goes against what you would think. You would think you'd be saving less when times are tighter, but it's actually the opposite.
Well, and I want to ask you again just a little bit about sharing because we talk about sharing what we make. We talk about sharing sharing the way that we talked about early on, but giving each other advice, holding each other accountable. I kind of think that if you were sharing with that guy back in 1999 and he's sharing with you, like him sharing with you what he was buying helped you learn the wrong thing. He has no idea, but it must be okay to have no idea because this dude's making tons of money. Is this where the financial planner comes in? Is this where having this level of expertise comes in?
I think it does. And, one of the reasons I got on TikTok, for example, I'm almost shy to talk about it because I have a very specific audience there that I'm willing to go to any measure to influence, to be honest. But one of the reasons I got on there is because my nephews were showing me TikTok and I was like, whoa. And then all of a sudden I saw a day trader pop up. And this was about like 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, it's back. Are you kidding me? I thought like everybody learned their lesson. And then I was like, of course not. We're in a bull market. And so there's absolutely, people are learning this stuff on social media like young people are. I have a passion towards teaching young people. And so that's the reason why I'm on there. They're getting their information from people. And at that conference we were just at, we did a session on TikTok. I'm like, we need all these personal finance experts to create more content because there's so much misinformation out there. And that's where people are learning. And social media is really strange. We can talk about it for a lot, but you're actually staring at somebody's face. And again, back to our prehistoric brains, we are not wired to gaze into somebody's eyes for minutes or hours at a time and not feel an intimate connection and not feel like they are an expert and we're going to do exactly what they say. It's really bizarre in terms of our history as a species. And so that's what makes it so powerful as an influence. And we have influencers. And so the source of information really, really does matter.
Boy, it does. I was looking at a study just recently that showed that a lot of young women especially are more likely to want to get their advice from social media than from a professional.
That's right. Well, that's where they are. They're on there all day long. And, you've got your static boomer website, and people are going to go look at that and try to look. A lot of financial planners don't even have videos on there or even their faces on there.
Right.
And how do you expect to engage a population where they are having an intimate, and if it's a one-way direction, but our brains don't really pay attention to that. It's like a pseudo relational experience and it has a real powerful influence on them. So I'm always encouraging financial planners, people who have this expertise to, I know it's a little bit scary and I know you got to get through your compliance department, but get on those apps and start creating some educational content because people are getting very confused. They're being misled. And a lot of this stuff targets the most vulnerable. So people like me, quite frankly, growing up in a lower socioeconomic environment where we don't have mentors and we're not sure what to do.
It's so frustrating to see that the compliance department, which is, as you know, as well as anybody, created for a lot of great reasons, is holding so many smart people back. But I want to get back into psychology for just a second because I really want to ask you about this. Early on in the book, in your new book, you talk about these two systems in our brain. We have system 1 and system 2, and one's working very fast. The other one's working very slow. I think this is an important concept for people to know as well and be aware of so that we kind of know what's going on in our head. Can you explain these two systems that are going on?
Yeah. So another way to look at it is we have like this animal brain, right? And so that's actually most of our brain. Most of your brain is operating below your conscious awareness. It's responsible for your instincts, your sleep-wake cycle, all of that. This is the part of the brain that is making most of our decisions. And marketers know this. And people who are really good at sales know this. And so what they will do is they'll feed that brain images of like, sexual prowess, being attractive to members of the opposite sex, having access to resources. Ugh. This is what kept your cave person ancestors alive, was this sort of base level of survival. And so what happens is we get spoken to at that level. And the next thing you know, you're engaging in a financial behavior. The challenge is for us to engage it's called the prefrontal cortex, or the scientist part of your brain. And this is why we encourage people like to not make buying decisions rapidly, don't buy and trade stocks when you're upset or excited, all that sort of thing. Because what happens is when you become emotionally charged, you become rationally challenged. It almost turns off that part of your brain that thinks through the consequences. And then you act in a way that was really built to survive, in that tribal society where you're running away from a saber-tooth tiger. We are engaging with that part of our brain in our financial lives, and it always is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So putting some time between that impulse and action so you can fire up that prefrontal cortex. And that's actually where financial planners can often play a role as sort of a stopgap between our impulse to do something and then actually pulling the trigger on it.
Man, I love that. And what I love about it is something that I had to learn by myself when I was buying cars. Because I've always felt like when I buy some of these high ticket items, there's a salesperson attached, and the person is totally doing exactly what you're saying. They totally do. And you know what I found? I want to get along with this person, Brad. I totally want to get along with this person. I don't want to say no. They seem great. I know they make more money if I buy from them, and I'm predisposed to want to share, right? Based on everything that you've said already. So I don't want to I found that instead of saying no, I just got to disengage. Like I just got to find a way just to disengage so I can apply the shock absorber and then not play the game at all.
Right. And they do things that are very sort of kinesthetic and emotional, like, oh, here, sit inside. No, sit inside. It's not just look at it. How does that feel? Oh, check out this seat. Oh, that smell. Ooh, isn't that incredible? Just imagine all the heads turning, Joe, as you're driving this thing down the road.
And they're not wrong. And they are not wrong. Yes, it's all good, and I love it. And then I think I can't afford this, and it's a whole different thing. I love that. I want to ask you about this. So if we're out there hiring a financial planner, mm-hmm. how do we make sure that this person is going to work with me on what's going on up here? And for people that aren't watching us on YouTube, they're listening. I'm pointing to my head.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to work in my head and not just do these transactional discussions, because, when I started off, and many of the discussions that still happen, as are around just goal achievement. Even if somebody's a good financial planner, mm-hmm. they're talking about what's your goal? How do we achieve it? But the stuff that you're talking about is a whole nother level. How do I make sure my pro is incorporating that? What questions should I be asking?
Yeah, I think I would look for, like you're describing too, it's a bit non-traditional in the sense that most people are going to financial planners for asset management or a financial plan, or, getting a review of like what sort of insurances they should get. So it's a very sort of practical, solution-focused type of approach. But now people know about behavioral finance and sort of the psychological aspects. And so I think I would just ask them directly, like, how do you work with clients around like, financial behaviors or investing behaviors, or how do you have any advice that you give clients on how to best work with money within their relationship or working with their kids, and just ask the question. Because quite frankly, too, a lot of financial planners, to your point, you weren't trained, in psychology. But if you've been a financial planner for a long time and you have any degree of success, chances are you faced many of these issues. And a financial planner will be able to talk to you about how they've worked with clients through some of those challenges.
And it's funny because so often in the communities that I'm in online, people talk about a financial planner and they have me do nothing. And often, as you know, better than anybody, Dr. Klontz, doing nothing is often the right thing to do.
Right. And I would ask, how do you usually communicate with your clients? And then the other thing I would do is think about how you want to have that relationship go, because many financial planners are very open to delivering an experience that you want, and they're not going to be able to know exactly what you want. So don't be afraid to interview them and ask for what you want in terms of your relationship with a financial advisor.
Yeah, if I'm at the car dealership, can I call you and have you walk me off the ledge?
Yeah. By the way, the last time I bought a car, I had my father on call, and so when they would go into the other room, I got to talk to my supervisor, and he'd come back, and I said, "Okay, that's great. Well, I got to go talk to my CPA," and so I would then leave. And so his boss was being the jerk, and my CPA was pretty strict about what I could spend. So you might want to try that one.
Yeah, no. Well, and I just love the idea of just having the right people in your corner, that will lie for you sometimes.
That's right. Exactly. Well, I mean, I know he's going back there and just taking a smoke break and drinking some coffee. There's nobody back there.
No.
So it's always good to yield to a higher authority and blame them. Then you can feel really good.
Well, and specifically to your point, I used to sell water softeners. I was in the telemarketing division. This is one of the crappy jobs I had during college. And the salesperson would call me and would say, "Hey, Joe, can you get Ralph on the line? Because I think that we need to see if we can give these people a discount." Or he'd say, "Hey, can you check in the back room and see if we've got the trade show model?" And then so I go, "Sure." And I'd sit there on the phone and I go, "Yup, we got the one from the trade show. It's sitting right here." And so the guy goes, "Hold on a second. Dr. Klontz, the trade show, it's a little beat up, but nobody looks at your water softener. It's going to work just fine. Do you guys care?" And the funny thing is we're selling the exact same one. It was so slimy.
Oh,
it was
right. But it works.
It does work.
You have to protect yourself. You have to be aware of it. And I think that's the piece of advice I would have for going into a sales situation. You're a buyer, just understanding that, in some cases too, like Las Vegas, for example, there are like teams of behavioral scientists that have gotten together to organize this experience in the most effective way to separate you from your money and to engage your animal brain. And I think it's really helpful to go into every buying situation being aware of that. Same thing with supermarkets. Their teams of behavioral scientists have spent a lot of time thinking about your experience throughout that entire store. And so the more you can the less you can trust yourself, the bottom line, the less you can trust your instincts around spending, the better off you're going to be.
Well, and also the more time you spend thinking about that, the more time I think, if they've got a whole damn team that's trying to get money out of my wallet, why wouldn't I spend 15 minutes putting together just a little micro strategy on this,
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, your brand new book is The Psychology of Financial Planning for financial planners. If you're a financial planner in the audience, man, if you're not talking about psychology with your clients, I think as you can hear us talking today, you're missing out. Is that available? How do CFPs and financial planners, financial coaches get your new book?
Yeah, so I hear that it's out now. I haven't gotten my copy yet, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any bookseller. And I will say this too, because, don't hold this against me, but I'm a professor, although I don't like to admit it. We wrote this book for practitioners. Because that's what I want to read.
No. This is clearly a book for practitioners.
Yes.
However, if you're a financial planner, if you are a practitioner, this is great. I would encourage people that are not practitioners to do one of two things. Read your last book, Brad, called
Money Mammoth.
Yes, which goes into the mammoth brain and the things that we talked about, where this all comes from. And check out your YouTube videos, which are not quite as professional.
Well, right. And TikTok is almost shameful. So don't watch TikTok unless you're willing to lose massive amounts of respect for me.
I get more respect for you, brother. I get more respect for you because bringing it to people that need it so bad, I think is fantastic. Well, it's about time we got you on, man. Thank you so much for hanging out with us a little bit and talking about psychology and money. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Joe. I really appreciate it.